The 423 verses are the golden words of the Buddha found in the Dhammapada. Welcome back, everyone, to Mind Podcast. The Dhammapada 423 contains the sacred words of the Buddha and is often considered a pocket guide for those studying and practicing Buddhism, as well as for those experiencing the truth of the Buddha's teachings. It is a collection of 423 verses that beautifully encapsulate the profound philosophy of the Buddha through poetic language. With 26 themes, these verses express deep insights into truth and noble values, offering practical wisdom that can be applied to everyday life, bringing happiness and peace to oneself, family, right here and now. And now, the chapter of pairs. Verses 1-2. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are mind-made. If one speaks or acts with a corrupt mind, suffering follows, like the wheel of the cart following the foot of the ox. But if one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows like a shadow that never leaves. Verse 3. Those who harbor hatred due to being wronged, saying, "They hit me, they cursed me, they defeated me, they robbed me," will never be free from hatred. Verse 4. But those who let go of resentment, saying, "They hit me, they cursed me, they defeated me, they robbed me," will find their hatred fade away, and their heart will be at peace. Verse 5. Hatred is never ended by hatred. It is only by love that hatred is ended. This is an ancient truth, a universal law. Verse 6. In this life, who knows when death will come? It lies in wait for us all. Those who realize this will cease their disputes and quarrels immediately. Verse 7. Those who indulge in sensual pleasures, failing to control their minds and senses, eating and drinking excessively, neglecting discipline, are defeated by Mara, just as a storm uproots a tree. Suffering and helplessness follow, all because of their attachment to worldly pleasures. Verse 8. But those who refrain from indulgence, who see the body as impure, who maintain self-control and moderation, are as steady as a mountain amidst strong winds. Verse 9. Though one may wear the monk's robe, if the mind is still filled with greed and anger, living in falsehood and lack of restraint, how can one be worthy of the title monk? Verse 10. But those who have eliminated greed, hatred, and defilements, who live with integrity and follow the discipline, who have mastered themselves, such a monk is truly deserving of respect. Verse 11. One who takes the false for true and the true for false follows a path of delusion and struggles to find the truth. Verse 12. But one who sees the true as true and the false as false follows the right path and attains the truth in this life. Verse 13. A poorly thatched house leaks in the rain. So too does one's mind, if it is not cultivated, allow greed and desire to seep in, bringing a lifetime of suffering. Verse 14. A well-thatched house withstands the rain, and one who is diligent in their practice, free from desire, has nothing to fear. Verse 15. In this life, the evildoer suffers, and in the next life they suffer even more. They live tormented by sorrow, and their heart is consumed by regret. Verse 16. But in this life, the virtuous live in joy, and in the next life, their joy increases. The fruits of their good deeds bring peace, and their heart is filled with happiness. Verse 17. In this life, the wrongdoer suffers, and in the next they continue to suffer. Their conscience torments them, and they are condemned to a miserable existence. Verse 18. But in this life the righteous are happy, and in the next they continue to experience joy. The fruits of their virtuous deeds lead them to happiness, and they are born into a realm of peace. Verse 19. Though one may recite many teachings, if they do not put them into practice, they are like a coward counting the cows of another. They have no share in the benefits of the Dhamma. Verse 20. But even if one speaks little, if they live according to the Dhamma, abandoning greed, hatred, and delusion, mindfully and with freedom, they are truly a monk, worthy of the name. 2. Diligence. Verse 21. Diligence is the path to life, but those who live carelessly ruin their lives. When mindfulness shines bright and clear, the negligent are like the dead, of no use. Verse 22. Those who live mindfully walk the path of the immortal, while carelessness leads to death and rebirth. With meditation, discipline, and diligence, one walks the path of awakening, finding peace in body and mind. Verse 23. The wise, devoted to meditation, diligent both day and night, reach the supreme peace of nirvana, free from suffering and the bonds of existence. Verse 24. With constant effort, self-control, and mindfulness, following the pure Dhamma, living virtuously, one sheds carelessness and grows in virtue. Their good deeds and blessings increase daily. Verse 25. Diligence helps overcome carelessness, guiding the mind and controlling the senses. The wise are like a sturdy island, untouched by the waves of the storm. Verse 26. The foolish, lost in carelessness, cling to unwholesome deeds and harvest sorrow. But the wise are diligent in all matters, cherishing their efforts like a treasure that enriches the self. Verse 27. Those who abandon worldly pleasures and are not ensnared by the desires of the world, who diligently practice meditation with a pure heart, will achieve deep, lasting joy. Verse 28. The wise who have cast off carelessness, standing on the heights of wisdom, free from sorrow and burdens, look down with compassion upon those who are ignorant and caught in the world. Verse 29. Among the careless, the mindful stand firm. Among the sleepy, the awakened are clear. The wise, like well-trained horses, leave behind the weak and slow. Verse 30. Just as Indra, the king of gods, rose to his realm through diligent practice and noble actions, so too is diligence praised and carelessness condemned by the world. Verse 31. The mind delights in diligence, fearing the harm that carelessness brings to noble conduct. By following the Buddha's profound teachings, one burns away the bonds of suffering and sorrow, lifetime after lifetime. Verse 32. The mind rejoices in diligence, fearing that carelessness will destroy virtue. By practicing the Buddha's sacred path, one will attain nirvana, where all suffering is left behind. Third, the mind. Verse 33. The restless mind, full of worry and fear, is hard to control and follows its own whims. But the wise straighten this mind, like a skilled archer straightens an arrow. Verse 34. Like fish thrown from their watery home, struggling to return to the source, so too does the mind struggle in its practice, determined to break free from the traps of Mara. Verse 35. The undisciplined mind jumps from one thing to another, like a monkey leaping from branch to branch, chasing pleasures in villages and towns. Blessed are those who master their mind, keeping it still and serene for lasting peace. Verse 36. The subtle mind is difficult to see and grasp, darting about, chasing after desires. But the wise gain control of their mind, filling the world with inner joy and peace. Verse 37. One need not run to distant places, nor hide in caves or become invisible. It is better to tame the mind here and now, breaking free from the bondage of Mara's army. Verse 38. For those whose minds are unsettled, the profound Dhamma is difficult to grasp. When faith is shaky and unsure, the light of wisdom struggles to shine. Verse 39. But when the mind is free from attachment and desire, letting go of hatred, envy, and greed, transcending the dualities of good and evil, one becomes awakened, no longer troubled by sorrow. Verse 40. The body, made of 5 aggregates, is fragile like pottery, but guard the mind as a fortified city. Wield the sword of wisdom to cut through ignorance and defeat Mara's army, not for glory, but for freedom. Verse 41. This body, subject to impermanence, will soon lie lifeless in a coffin. When the mind has departed, the body is as useless as a broken log. Verse 42. Though enemies may harm one another, and foes take revenge on their foes, there is no enemy greater than a wicked mind, which can sink one into suffering for countless lifetimes. Verse 43. Even parents wishing to bestow blessings on their children cannot provide them with lasting protection. It is only through cultivating a pure mind and good deeds that one can truly create their own fortune, growing stronger each day. 4. Flowers. Verse 44. Who can conquer the earth and the heavens, and rise above the realm of Yama, the Lord of Death? None but the one who realizes the Buddha's teachings, like a skilled person weaving a beautiful garland of flowers. Verse 45. The noble disciple who surpasses the earth and heavens and transcends even the realm of Yama becomes enlightened in the Buddha's teachings, like one who masterfully strings together a garland of beautiful flowers. Verse 46. When one realizes that the body is like a bubble, and life is as fleeting as a flash of lightning, they break the arrows of Mara, escaping beyond the reach of death for miles uncounted. Verse 47. Those who are intoxicated by sensual pleasures are caught by death, swept away, like a sleeping village is carried away by a sudden flood in the night. Verse 48. Those who gather the flowers of sensual pleasure, entangled and attached, unable to let go, before their thirst for pleasure is satisfied, are taken by death with no room for negotiation. Verse 49. Just as a bee gathers nectar from a flower without harming its color or fragrance, so too does the wise one move through the world, benefiting others without causing harm. Verse 50. Do not focus on the faults of others, nor on what they have or have not done. Instead, look at your own actions, considering whether they are pure or impure, intentional or unintentional. Verse 51. Like a beautiful flower, vibrant in color but lacking fragrance, so too are fine words that are spoken but not lived. They are empty and of little value. Verse 52. But like a beautiful flower, rich in both color and fragrance, so too are fine words that are lived out in action. Such words bear abundant fruit. Verse 53. Just as one can weave many garlands from a heap of flowers, so too can one gather much merit from the virtuous deeds they perform while living in this world. Verse 54. The fragrance of flowers like jasmine or sandalwood does not travel against the wind, but the fragrance of a virtuous person spreads far and wide even against the wind. Verse 55. The fragrance of sandalwood and jasmine is faint, but the fragrance of virtue is supreme. No flower's scent can compare to the scent of one living in virtue. Verse 56. The fragrance of flowers may be subtle, and even sandalwood may not last long, but the fragrance of a virtuous person is carried high by the wind, filling the skies. Verse 57. Those who live in virtue, guarding their mind and body with discipline, attain true liberation and wisdom. Mara's armies cannot find their path. Verse 58. In a dirty and polluted road, a lotus flower blooms, spreading its sweet fragrance. So too, in a world filled with ignorance and suffering, the wise one shines forth with compassion and wisdom. Verse 59. Verse 59. Among the masses, many are lost in suffering, blinded by desire and unaware of the truth. But there is one who follows the Buddha's path, radiating wisdom and spiritual understanding. The fool. Verse 60. Restless and troubled is the one who cannot sleep, like a traveler weary from a long, exhausting journey. The fool who ignores the Dhamma wanders in the cycle of birth and death, never finding a way out. Verse 61. In life, if you cannot find a wise companion who is better or equal to yourself, do not associate with fools, lest you be trapped in suffering and misery. Verse 62. The fool clings to the idea of my children, my wealth, thinking, these are mine. Yet suffering follows those who cling, for the wise know that I is not truly I. Verse 63. The fool who knows they are a fool has a chance to grow in wisdom, but the fool who thinks they are wise is the greatest fool of all. Verse 64. Though a fool may sit beside the wise, they will not grasp the true Dhamma. Like a spoon does not taste the flavor of the soup, no matter how long it stays in the bowl. Verse 65. But when the fool learns from the wise and understands the Buddha's teachings, they are like the tongue that tastes the flavor of the soup, savoring the sweet taste of wisdom. Verse 66. The fool neglects to practice the Dhamma. Their selfishness becomes their own worst enemy. They abandon virtuous deeds, and the fruits of their evil actions cling to them throughout their life. Verse 67. Without regret for their wrongful deeds, the fool follows their habitual ways, but one day they will weep in sorrow when the bitter fruits of their actions ripen. Verse 68. When a good deed is done, regret does not follow. Even if no one recognizes it, the doer is filled with joy and contentment, for the blessings of their actions will bear fruit. Verse 69. When a foolish act has not yet brought its result, the fool may think it is sweet like honey, but when the consequences ripen, suffering and sorrow overtake them day and night. Verse 70. Even if one practices austerities for years, standing on one leg, eating little and sleeping less, it cannot compare to the merit gained by understanding the truth of dependent origination. Verse 71. The consequences of evil deeds may not ripen right away, just as fresh milk takes time to curdle, but they silently follow the wrongdoer, like a fire smoldering under a bed of ashes. Verse 72. The fool obsessed with fame and illusions lives in constant suffering, day and night. Their fortune fades over time as their mind remains trapped in pain and confusion. Verse 73. Craving for recognition, the fool seeks status, wanting to sit in front of the assembly of monks. They strive for power, even over the abbot, desiring the respect and fear of others. Verse 74. Fools deceive both lay people and monks, claiming to be the creators of important works. Driven by arrogance and ambition, they are ensnared by their own foolish pride. Verse 75. The path of worldly attachment leads back to worldly suffering, while the path of nirvana leads to liberation. Understanding both paths, the wise abandon craving for fame and fortune and walk the way of detachment and freedom. Sits the wise. Verse 76. When meeting a wise person who points out your faults, be grateful and make an effort to correct them. To associate with the wise is a blessing, for they guide you to a treasure here in this very life. Verse 77. The wise help others correct their mistakes, turning them away from false paths and guiding them to the right way. Good people respect and honor such wisdom, while the wicked resent and despise it. Verse 78. Do not associate with the wicked, with those who are deceitful, cruel, or small-minded. Instead, befriend the virtuous, following their example of righteous conduct and self-improvement. Verse 79. Those who are wise and steeped in the Buddha's teachings find joy in the profound happiness of the Dhamma. Their hearts remain pure and peaceful, and they live in the bliss of the noble truth, day and night. Verse 80. As farmers channel water, as fletchers shape arrows, and as carpenters straighten wood, so too do the wise master their own minds. Verse 81. Like a rock that remains unmoved by the wind, the wise remain steady in their mastery of the mind, unaffected by praise or blame, unconcerned by the ups and downs of worldly life. Verse 82. The wise find joy in the teachings of the Buddha, guarding their happiness and peace. Their minds are like deep, clear lakes, unstirred and unclouded by the troubles of the world. Verse 83. The wise do not cling to attachments, having let go of desire and greed. Whether facing adversity or good fortune, their minds remain undisturbed, free from sorrow or joy. Verse 84. The wise do not act out of selfishness, nor for the sake of another, nor for wealth or power. They do not commit evil even for the sake of their children or fame, or for ruling over a kingdom. They are fair, honest, and live by virtue, upholding the Dhamma and developing their wisdom, enriching their hearts with goodness. Verse 85. Most people remain trapped in the cycle of existence. Few are those who reach beyond it. Most do not return to the path of awakening, but remain lost, unable to find their way to true understanding. Verse 86. But those who practice the Buddha's teachings, who follow the path of awareness and wisdom, they reach the shore of enlightenment, leaving behind the suffering of birth and death. Verse 87. The wise abandon attachment and desire, turning their minds towards enlightenment and nirvana. No longer ignorant, angry, or greedy, they progress upwards, planting the seeds of virtue deep within. Verse 88. Find joy in the peaceful bliss of nirvana, letting go of possessions, desires, and attachments. The wise cleanse their hearts and minds, freeing themselves from impurities and filling themselves with peace. Verse 89. With a mind free from clinging, abandoning desire, and practicing the 7 factors of enlightenment, the wise are no longer troubled by worldly defilements, living in tranquility and shining brightly in the world. The 7th, the Arahant, verse 90. Those who have escaped the cycle of birth and death have broken the chains and shattered the bonds. Freed from all sorrow and suffering, they move through life in peace, untouched by distress. Verse 91. With mindfulness, diligence, and clear awareness, they are free from sorrow and detached from desire. Living alone, at peace wherever they are, like a swan that leaves the lake, soaring through the sky. Verse 92. Unconcerned with wealth or fame, they master their mind and eat in moderation. Their heart is empty of attachments, their mind formless and free. Having let go of all clinging, they escape the cycle of existence, like a bird in the sky, leaving no trace behind. Verse 93. For those who have destroyed defilements and desire, free from attachment, always dwelling in freedom, their hearts are empty, their minds formless, like birds flying through the sky, leaving no footprint behind. Verse 94. They have tamed the 6 senses and their feelings, like a well-trained horse obeys its master. Having eradicated defilements, pride, and greed, they stand as arahants among humans and gods. Verse 95. As vast as the earth, their hearts bear no resentment. Like a pillar unshaken by the winds of change, their minds are calm, free from greed and ignorance. The arahant shines brightly among all beings. Verse 96. with a peaceful mind and kind intentions. Their words are gentle and their actions are praiseworthy. Living in wisdom and righteousness, they dwell in peace and joy, filled with serenity. Verse 97. Free from superstition, they cut through all attachments, training their minds and realizing the unconditioned. Practicing non-attachment and letting go, they are like a great mountain, steadfast and supreme. Verse 98. Whether they live in a small village or a quiet forest, on a mountain peak or deep in the wilderness, wherever the Arahant resides, the people there are blessed by the presence of the noble Dhamma. Verse 99. The deep forest is a delight, a place where ordinary people dare not tread. But those who have abandoned desire and craving find peace there, caring not for worldly gain or fame. V8. Thousands. Verse 100. Even if one speaks 1,000 useless words that do not bring happiness to life, it is better to speak just a few words that are filled with meaning and bring peace to others. Verse 101. Even if one recites hundreds of verses that have no connection to nirvana, it is better to speak a single word of the Dhamma that when heard brings benefit and peace to the heart. Verse 102. Even if one teaches many teachings, but they do not help others let go of attachment or sorrow, it is better to speak a single profound truth that brings lasting happiness and joy. Verse 103. One may conquer thousands upon thousands in battle, winning glory and bringing happiness to the nation. But greater is the victory of the one who conquers themselves, for that is a deeper, more magnificent triumph. Verse 104. Self-conquest is greater than any other victory, greater than defeating an external foe. Blessed is the one who masters themselves, living in happiness, free from sorrow and pain. Verse 105. No power, whether of gods, demons, or even Mara, can compare to the one who has overcome themselves. For the one who has conquered their own mind is unmatched in strength and wisdom. Verse 106. Even if one were to offer thousands of sacrifices to gods and deities for 100 years, it is far better to support a noble one who dispels delusion and brings joy to the heart. Verse 107. Even if one were to worship fire in the forest for 100 years, it does not compare to the offering made to a virtuous person. Supporting the wise is far more fruitful than 100 years of empty rituals. Verse 108. Even if one offers sacrifices for 100 years, praying for blessings and a long life, it is not as valuable as making a small offering to a righteous person who spreads kindness and wisdom. Verse 109. Whoever honors a true spiritual practitioner and follows their path receives abundant blessings, health, beauty, long life, and joy each day. Verses 110 to 111. If one were to live 100 years in indulgence, it is far better to live just one day, practicing meditation with insight and diligence. 100 years of ignorance cannot compare to a single day of wisdom and meditation, bringing peace. Verse 112. Even if one lives 100 years in laziness, it is far better to live just one day, with dedication and effort, overcoming obstacles and striving for success. Verse 113. 100 years spent lost in attachment to the five aggregates, entangled in the cycle of rebirth, cannot compare to a single day of awakening, realizing impermanence and the nature of existence, here and now. Verses 114 to 115. 100 years without understanding the deathless is nothing compared to one day of knowing the unborn. 100 years of ignorance of the supreme Dhamma is nothing compared to one day of realizing the highest truth. Ninth. Evil. Verse 116. The wise should act swiftly in doing good and avoid evil as one avoids a deep abyss. Delaying in doing good allows the mind to be overcome by evil, and suffering will soon follow. Verse 117. If you have committed an evil deed, do not continue down that path or add to your wrongs. Do not make excuses or try to forget, for the bitter fruit of your actions will eventually come, binding you in chains. Verse 118. When given the opportunity to plant the seeds of goodness, be diligent and continue to nurture them. Your virtuous deeds will grow day by day, and those who cultivate merit will soon live in peace. Verse 119. The one who commits evil may not yet suffer, but it is not because the law of karma is ineffective. When the bad fruit ripens, suffering will arrive, bringing pain and sorrow day and night. Verse 120. When someone does good, yet no benefit has come, it is because the fruit of good deeds has not yet ripened. When the conditions are right, the fruit will blossom, and the saying, good begets good, will prove true. Verse 121. Do not underestimate small acts of evil, thinking they will cause no harm. Consider how drops of water fill a cup. Each small drop eventually overflows it. The fool, indulging in small wrongs day by day, increases their misfortune until the harvest of sorrow comes. Verse 122. Do not disregard small acts of goodness, thinking they do not matter. Just as a cup is filled by tiny drops of water, so too do small acts of goodness lead to a life as bright as the stars. Verse 123. The wise avoid poisonous substances, just as a cautious merchant avoids dangerous roads. The wise person governs their actions, staying clear of evil and walking the safe path. Verse 124. A clean hand holding poison will not be harmed by it. Similarly, a person who is pure in heart does not suffer from the harm caused by evil deeds. Verse 125. If someone harms a virtuous person, it is like sending dust against the wind. The suffering they inflict will come back to them, for evil rebounds on the wrongdoer. Verse 126. The virtuous are born into happiness, while the wicked are born into sorrowful realms. Those who live with goodness rise to heavenly realms, and those who are supremely virtuous reach nirvana. Verse 127. Even if you fly high in the sky or dive deep into the ocean, even if you hide in a cave, you cannot escape the consequences of the evil you have done. Verse 128. Even if you soar high in the sky or swim in the deepest ocean, even if you hide in a cave, death will always follow you. You cannot escape it. X punishment. Verse 129. All living beings fear death. They fear violence, harm, and suffering. Recognizing the impermanence of life, one should neither harm nor kill others. Verse 130. All beings wish for peace, happiness, and survival. Recognizing the value of life, one should not cause death or harm to others. Verse 131. If someone seeks blessings but uses weapons and violence to kill living beings, they cannot find peace or happiness. In this life and the next, suffering will be their own doing. Verse 132. If one seeks blessings and refrains from harming others, cultivating love and compassion for all creatures, they will live in peace and joy in this life and the next. Verse 133. When a person speaks harsh and hurtful words, and another responds with bitterness and anger, suffering comes to both, for nothing is gained through conflict and retaliation. Verse 134. But if one remains mindful and silent, like a broken bell that makes no sound, their heart remains calm, and they are free from hatred, moving toward nirvana. Verse 135. Just as a herdsman drives cattle to pasture and brings them home in the evening, so too do aging and death drive all living beings through the cycle of life. Verse 136. The ignorant commit harmful deeds, unaware of the consequences they create. Like a fire burning through the mind, these actions lead to suffering and torment. Verses 137 to 140. For those who strike and harm others with weapons or violence, there are 10 possible outcomes. First, they suffer from pain and agony. Second, they face calamity. Third, they endure bodily injury. Fourth, they lose their intelligence and become forgetful. Fifth, they suffer legal troubles and persecution. Sixth, they are falsely accused and misunderstood. Seventh, their family is divided. Eighth, their wealth is destroyed. Ninth, they are afflicted by fire or poverty. And 10th, after death, they are reborn as animals. Verse 141. Living naked, fasting, or enduring hardship, unwashed and disheveled, cannot purify the heart if doubt and ignorance still remain. Verse 142. True adornment comes from inner peace, from mastering the mind, living with virtue, and showing compassion. Those who embody these qualities are like monks, as noble as the highest heavens. Verse 143. Rare are those who are truly mindful, who guard their actions, feel shame, and follow their conscience. Like a skilled horse that needs no whip, they live without the need for punishment. Verse 144. Just as a fine horse needs no whip, so too should one live with courage, diligence, and mindfulness. Through faith, virtue, and meditation, one follows the path of truth, guided by the Dhamma. Verse 145. Just as a skilled water worker channels water, and a fletcher shapes arrows and a carpenter planes wood, so too does the wise person shape their own mind day and night. Set, old age. Verse 146. Why laugh, why seek joy, when the fires of desire are burning the world away? Darkness veils the night sky, why not strive to find a light that will guide you? Verse 147. The body appears vibrant and full of life, but inside it is just a bundle of wounds. Why cling to it with attachment and sorrow? The body is impermanent, fragile, and fleeting. Verse 148. Soon the body will age and decay, becoming a vessel of disease and suffering. It is a temporary collection of parts, and death will end it, leading to rebirth in the cycle of existence. Verse 149. This body, pale like a white dove, will soon be discarded like a gourd in the autumn. When death comes, the corpse is repulsive. What joy is there in clinging to this body? Verse 150. The body is like an ancient city, built of bones with blood and sinews, holding within it old age, death, and disease. Deception and pride surround it. What beauty does it really have? Verse 151. Even the finest royal chariots wear out, and so too will the body decay and fade away. But the Dhamma of the wise stays youthful forever. Engrave the words of the noble ones deep in your heart. Verse 152. If one is young but unlearned and grows old without gaining wisdom, they are no different from a large, strong ox, big in body but empty of mind, like a shadow in the dark. Verses 153 to 154. For many lifetimes I wandered through the cycle of existence, seeking the builder of this body. Again and again I searched but could not find him, endlessly bound in the suffering of rebirth and death. But now I have found the builder. You shall not build another house for me. I have broken the beams, the roof is shattered, I have realized nirvana. Desire, craving, and clinging have been extinguished. Verse 155. In youth, if one neglects virtue and does not learn to care for themselves, when old age arrives, they will face hardship, like a lonely heron waiting by a dried-up pond with no fish in sight. Verse 156. The one who, in their youth, fails to cultivate virtue, learns no trade and earns no wealth. When old age comes, they will live in regret, mourning their past, sighing with sorrow. The Twet. The Self. Verse 157. One who values themselves should guard their own mind, with careful attention both day and night. The wise always protect themselves, staying mindful and clear in heart and mind. Verse 158. The wise establish themselves firmly first, mastering their own mind and body with truth. Then they teach and guide others, living as an example admired by the world. Verse 159. Only after completing one's own practice can one properly guide and educate others. Master yourself, body and mind, and offer the mirror of good character and virtue to others. Verse 160. The wise rely on themselves for strength, not seeking support from anyone else. How fortunate to control your own mind. There is no greater achievement in this world. Verse 161. Evil deeds are created by oneself, born from the mind. Who else is there to blame? Evil actions crush the wrongdoer, like a diamond breaking a common stone. Verse 162. Like a parasite that destroys the tree it clings to, those who live without integrity, with poor conduct and careless virtue, bring ruin upon themselves, delighting their enemies. Verse 163. Doing harm requires no skill, causing pain to oneself is easy, but doing good, truly righteous deeds is difficult, bringing benefit to oneself and the world. Verse 164. The fool who holds wrong views and slanders the profound teachings of the arahants harms themselves like a bamboo plant dying, as soon as it bears fruit, bringing its own end. Verse 165. All evil actions are self-created, leading to suffering and misfortune. But when we do good today, the fruits of joy and peace will follow soon after. Understand that purity or impurity comes from the mind and heart within. Relying on others will not lead to success, and blaming others for our mistakes is pointless. Verse 166. Though we may serve and help others, never forget to also benefit yourself. Commit to learning the highest truths and aim for liberation until the goal is reached. The world. Verse 167. The wise should not hold on to wrong views, nor live carelessly, driven by base desires. Do not prolong unwholesome actions, for doing so will keep you trapped in the cycle of birth and death. Verses 168 to 169. Those who are diligent and do not chase after pleasures, who live with purity and cultivate noble virtues, upholding discipline and righteous conduct, will reap blessings in both this life and the next, due to the cultivation of the mind. Verse 170. Reflect deeply on the fleeting nature of worldly life. Everything is like bubbles, an illusion. Once you realize the truth of impermanence, death will have no hold on you, as it does not touch the enlightened. Verse 171. The world, with all its beauty, is but an illusion, like a grand royal chariot adorned in finery. The fool clings to it, accumulating desires, while the wise remain detached, seeing beyond the allure of worldly life. Verse 172. Even if one has lived carelessly in the past, they can later awaken and transform their mind. By doing good and shining in the world, they are like the full moon emerging from behind the clouds. Verse 173. Even if one has committed many wrongs in the past, if they repent and turn their heart toward goodness, they too will shine brightly in the world, like the full moon when the clouds have cleared away. Verse 174. The world is filled with those who are blind to the truth, but few are those with clear understanding. Like a wise bird avoiding the trap, the virtuous live in peace and joy, untouched by the world. Verse 175. Like swans gliding through the sky, masters of their own flight, free in the heavens, the wise transcend the worldly realm, overcoming the obstacles of Mara and remaining steadfast on the path of truth. Verse 176. Those who do not respect the Dhamma, who speak lies and deceive others, who hate goodness and deny the existence of the afterlife, sink deeper into the path of evil. When will they ever find release? Verse 177. The stingy will never be reborn in the heavenly realms, and the foolish who lack compassion remain in ignorance. But the kind-hearted, who love to live virtuously, will find themselves blessed in the life to come, beyond the ordinary. Verse 178. The attainment of the first stage of sainthood is more radiant than the power of the ruler of the heavens. Even the splendor of the gods cannot compare to the purity and virtue of those who have realized the truth in this world. 14th. The Buddha, verse 179. The Buddha has fully conquered the defilements of the world, eliminating desire and attaining profound wisdom, leaving no trace in this world. Who can trace the steps of one who has transcended? Verse 180. The one who has freed themselves from the net of desire and craving, who has ended rebirth and gained deep insight, leaves no trace in this world. Who can trace the steps of one who has gone beyond? Verse 181. The wise, who meditate with diligence, finding joy in detachment and solitude, are mindful day and night, honored by both gods and humans, shining like the moon among stars. Verse 182. Happy is the one who lives with virtue, fortunate is the one who lives in peaceful purity. Rare it is to hear the Dhamma and practice it. Rarest of all is to meet a Buddha and attain enlightenment. Verse 183. Do no harm in any situation. Cultivate goodness even amidst hardship. Train the mind to be pure and serene. This is the timeless teaching of the Buddha. Verse 184. Patience and endurance are the highest virtues. Attaining nirvana is the ultimate goal. Do no harm to any living being. This is the sacred path of the monk, profound and deep. Verse 185. Do not slander, do not cause harm, master yourself, keeping the precepts intact. Eat and live in moderation, practice meditation. Live a life of peace, causing no trouble to anyone. Verses 186 to 187. Even if rain showers down gold and silver, the endless desires of humans are never satisfied. The wise understand this truth. There is far more suffering than joy in the pursuit of desire. Knowing this, the one who follows the Buddha's path turns away from sensual pleasures, living free and radiant in the world. Verses 188 to 189. In times of danger and suffering, people seek refuge in gods, forests, mountains, temples, and trees, offering sacrifices and prayers, hoping for peace and safety. But such refuge is of no use, for it is based on superstition and cannot truly bring relief. Verse 190. The true refuge is found in the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, rare and precious. In difficult times, they are the true sanctuary, and by following the Four Noble Truths, one escapes suffering. Verse 191. Recognize suffering and the cause of suffering, realize nirvana, and follow the Noble Eightfold Path. This leads to peace, freeing one from all misery and sorrow in the world. Verse 192. Taking refuge in the three jewels brings great blessings, filling the heart with peace and joy. The wise find their eternal refuge here, saying farewell to suffering and living in ease. Verse 193. A wise person who cultivates virtue and integrity is rare to find in this world. Wherever such a person resides, that community is blessed with happiness and peace. Verse 194. How fortunate it is when a Buddha appears, when the Dhamma spreads its wisdom across the land, when the Sangha lives in harmony, and the four assemblies of disciples find joy in their practice. Verse 195. Honor and respect those who were. Happiness. Verse 197. Happy indeed is living among those who are full of hatred, while remaining peaceful, free from anger. Blessed is living among the bitter and resentful, without harboring resentment, with a calm heart. Verse 198. Happy indeed is living among those who are sick, while being strong and healthy. Blessed is living amidst danger and uncertainty, while remaining peaceful and unharmed, safe and sound. Verse 199. Happy indeed is living among those who are driven by desire, while being free from craving, clear and pure in heart. Blessed is living in the midst of impermanence, with no desire, free from sorrow and suffering. Verse 200. Happy indeed is living among those who are attached to possessions, while being free from greed, attachment, and sorrow. With a mind of peace, seeking nothing, one experiences joy as radiant as the heavenly realms. Verse 201. Victory often leads to resentment, while defeat brings bitterness and suffering. But happy are those who live in harmony, letting go of victory and defeat and finding joy and peace. Verse 202. Among all fires, desire is the fiercest, and anger surpasses even the armies of Mara. But no suffering compares to the suffering of attachment to the self, while nirvana is the ultimate peace and happiness. Verse 203. Hunger and thirst are the most dangerous diseases, and attachment to the self brings even greater suffering. But overcoming both self and attachment, one attains nirvana, the blissful freedom of joy. Verse 204. Health is the greatest gift, contentment is the greatest wealth. A trusted friend is the best companion, and nirvana is the ultimate happiness, surpassing all other blessings. Verse 205. Those who taste the peace of solitude and the joy of nirvana experience a rare and lasting happiness. Free from impurities and fear, they live in the delight of the Dhamma, their hearts unstained. Verse 206. How fortunate to meet a noble person, for there is no greater happiness than their presence. Blessed is being free from the company of fools, for the further one is from them, the more peace one finds. Verse 207. Living with the foolish brings suffering, like living with an enemy. But living with the wise brings joy, like being with family, safe and free from fear. Verse 208. Cherish those who are wise and insightful, who are virtuous and noble in character. Stay close to them and befriend them, like the moon illuminating the path you walk. 16th. Affection. Verse 209. Chasing after what should be avoided, and neglecting what should be pursued, forsaking noble aims and clinging to desires. How can one resent those who devote themselves to the path? Verse 210. Do not grow too attached to those you love, nor associate with those who resent or dislike you. The pain of not meeting loved ones is immense, and the suffering from dealing with enemies is even greater. Verse 211. Understanding this, let go of love and hatred. Separation from what is loved causes deep sorrow. But once love and hate are relinquished, the bonds of suffering are cut and true joy is found. Verse 212. The root of desire gives birth to suffering, creating sorrow, fear, and attachment to self. Those who remove desire from their heart are free from fear and no longer bound by sorrow. Verse 213. The root of attachment gives rise to suffering, bringing sorrow, fear, and self-centeredness. Those who remove attachment from their heart are free from fear and no longer weighed down by sorrow. Verse 214. The root of affection brings forth suffering, creating sorrow, fear, and attachment to self. Those who remove affection from their heart are free from fear and no longer bound by sorrow. Verse 215. The root of sensual craving leads to suffering, causing sorrow, fear, and self-centeredness. Those who remove sensual craving from their heart are free from fear and no longer burdened by sorrow. Verse 216. The root of thirst for pleasure creates suffering, bringing sorrow, fear, and attachment to self. Those who remove this thirst from their heart are free from fear and no longer weighed down by sorrow. Verse 217. Those who are virtuous and wise, who follow the good Dhamma and understand the truth, who complete what needs to be done, are revered by all, admired for their perfection. Verse 218. Those who have attained nirvana beyond words, who have realized the 3 stages of wisdom, free from desires with a peaceful heart, these noble ones swim against the current of the world. Verse 2-19. Like a traveler who has long been absent, returning home safely and sound, their family and friends rejoice, celebrating the reunion with joy and warmth. Verse 2:20. In the same way, when a person does good, in this life and in lives to come, the fruits of their good deeds welcome them, with happiness that no one can surpass. 17th. Anger. Verse 2:21. Those who have transformed their anger, who have let go of attachment to form, pride, and desire, who are no longer bound by the fetters of the world, such property-less ones have cast away all suffering. Verse 2:22. Control your anger like applying brakes to a speeding car, stopping it immediately. Only such a one deserves to be called a skillful driver, while others are merely holding the reins. Verse 2:23. Overcome anger with non-anger, overcome greed with generosity, conquer evil with kindness, and overcome falsehood with truth. Verse 2:24. Even in poverty, practice generosity, and transform the mind so that anger fades away. Speak with kind and sincere words. This is the path that leads to heavenly realms. Verse 2:25. Those who spread love and non-harm, who live freely with peace in body and mind, will abandon defilements and attain nirvana, ending all suffering, finding peace in the world. Verse 2:26. The mindful, who work day and night with diligence, learning and practicing side by side, direct their heart toward nirvana, and easily overcome the defilements. Verse 2:27. The silent one is criticized for saying nothing. The speaker is criticized for speaking too much. Who in this world is free from blame? Criticism is an age-old trait of the world. Verse 2:28. It is a timeless truth. No one has ever been entirely blamed, nor has anyone ever been wholly praised. Praise and blame, why be concerned with them? Verse 2:29. The wise live without fault, complete in virtue, meditation, and wisdom. Those who examine them impartially honor and respect the true practitioner. Verse 2:30. The one who keeps their virtue pure, like gleaming gold, devoted to their practice with lofty conduct, is worthy of praise from the world. Even Brahma would offer words of admiration. Verse 231. Master the body, and do not give in to anger. Guard the body, and you will live in peace. Refrain from evil actions, and always practice virtuous deeds with diligence. Verse 232. Master your speech, and do not give in to anger. Guard your words, and you will live in peace. Avoid harsh, cruel words, and always speak with kindness and care. Verse 233. Master your mind, and do not give in to anger. Guard your thoughts, and you will live in peace. Keep your mind free from wrong views and harshness, and always think with truth and mindfulness. Verse 234. The wise person controls their body, speech, and mind, guarding all three with great care. With pure actions, kind words, and true thoughts, they are fully disciplined, free from defilement. The 18. Impurities. Verse 235. This body will wither like a dying leaf, and death is always waiting nearby. Life is fleeting, uncertain at best, and the journey is long and tiring if unprepared. Verse 236. Build an island of refuge for yourself. Be diligent and practice the path. Free yourself from defilements, purify the mind, and you will reach the sacred land of heavenly rebirth. Verse 237. This body weakens and approaches its end. Death is near, like a shadow always present. You cannot rest in the middle of the journey, and without preparation, the path will exhaust you. Verse 238. Build a refuge within yourself. Be diligent in practicing the path. Free yourself from defilements and purify the mind. Then you will no longer be bound by old age, death, or rebirth. Verse 239. The wise work on their own purification, clearing their minds from all defilements, like a skilled goldsmith refining gold, removing the impurities until only pure gold remains. Verse 240. Rust arises from iron and slowly consumes it. So too do evil deeds consume the wrongdoer. The actions of the wicked bring forth suffering, as they are weighed down by the consequences of their own deeds. Verse 241. A neglected scripture gathers dust, a neglected house falls into ruin. Neglect leads to the decay of beauty, and carelessness destroys those who fail to guard themselves. Verse 242. A lack of chastity taints a woman. Stinginess defiles the act of giving. Evil conduct is the greatest stain, bringing misery in this life and the next. Verse 243. Of all the impurities, ignorance is the greatest, blinding the mind and clouding the heart. But those who study and practice the Dhamma are free from defilements and transcend the cycle of birth and death. Verse 244. It's easy to live shamelessly, acting recklessly, like a crow pecking at a wound. But arrogance and pride bring defilement, leading to discord and suffering. Verse 245. How beautiful is the one who lives with modesty, free from arrogance, at peace with others. They have freed themselves from attachment, keeping their mind clear, truthful, and pure. Verses 246 to 248. Some people kill, steal, lie, indulge in intoxication, and engage in adultery. By doing these things, they dig their own grave, burying themselves in misery and suffering. Therefore, the wise restrain their mind, and by doing so, evil deeds are overcome. Greed and sin are halted, and the endless cycle of suffering is brought to an end. Verse 249. When one gives from a heart filled with generosity or joy, they find happiness in their giving. But those who are envious or resentful cannot find peace or stillness in their hearts. Verse 250. Those who let go of envy and resentment and rejoice in the happiness of others will find peace and joy, even in the midst of life's difficulties. Verse 251. Desire is the fiercest fire. There is no greater attachment than hatred. No net is more entrapping than delusion. And no river is stronger than the currents of craving. Verse 252. It's easy to see the faults of others, to criticize and cast blame. But it's difficult to see one's own faults, as one hides them like a cheat concealing a bad hand in a game. Verse 253. Those who are quick to criticize others, often filled with arrogance and judgment, will find their own mental suffering increasing. How can such a mind ever find peace? Verse 254. There are no traces left in the sky, and outside the Buddha's path it is hard to find a true monk. The world loves to argue and debate, but the Buddha, in his peace, remains beyond victory and defeat. Verse 255. There are no traces left in the sky, and outside the Buddha's path it is hard to find a true monk. All things conditioned are subject to change, but the Buddha remains unmoved, in perfect peace. The righteous. Verse 256. The righteous one is the true standard, not ruled by tyranny or extremism. The wise act with fairness and clarity, knowing right from wrong without error. Verse 257. The righteous one is a person of wisdom, living justly and guiding others with fairness. They are free from tyranny and self-interest, living by the law, uplifting the world. Verse 258. The wise are not necessarily those who know much, or speak of many things in the world. They are free from hatred and fear of others, living in peace, radiating virtue and truth. Verse 259. It is not through many words that one upholds the law, but by following the path with unwavering practice. They live by the Dhamma, free from indulgence, deeply committed to the golden path of truth. Verse 260. One is not a true elder because of gray hair, or because they have lived many years. If their virtue and wisdom are shallow, they are merely old in age, not in wisdom. Verse 261. The true elder understands the Four Noble Truths, has mastery over the senses, wisdom and truth. Free from impurities and with a pure mind, such an elder is worthy of respect in this life. Verse 262. It is not beauty or eloquence that makes someone virtuous or righteous. One who is free from selfishness and envy, and who has abandoned arrogance, is truly a noble person. Verse 263. The virtuous person has conquered greed, anger, and delusion, the roots of suffering. They possess clear wisdom and radiant virtues, overflowing with the noble Dhamma. Verse 264. A monk is not defined by a shaved head. It is through practicing the path and overcoming desire that one is truly a monk, living a life of integrity and truth. Verse 265. Those who have transformed both great and small evils, who have conquered greed and anger, who are free from harmful actions and purified in mind, are monks who deserve the highest respect. Verse 266. A monk is not simply a beggar with a bowl, wandering and asking for food. A true monk is one who understands the Dhamma, with complete virtue and shining wisdom. Verse 267. The true monk goes beyond notions of good and evil, living with virtuous conduct and clarity. Using wisdom as their guide, they see the true nature of all things, full of the Dhamma. Verse 268. Merely staying silent without wisdom does not make one a sage. The wise quickly choose the right path, and their happiness leads all good actions. Verse 269. The true sage understands both the present and the future, and eliminates evil actions today. Such a one is worthy to be called a noble disciple of the Buddha, deep in their practice. Verse 270, the noble ones do not harm or kill, neither human beings nor animals. With a heart full of compassion, they extend love to all living beings, sentient and insentient. Verses 271-272, it is not merely by keeping rules and precepts or by learning much that one reaches liberation. It is not by advanced meditation or living alone in seclusion. One cannot claim enlightenment or true freedom until all impurities have been eradicated. Only then is the practice complete. XX. The path, verse 273. The Noble Eightfold Path is the only path. The Four Noble Truths are the highest truth. Abandoning craving leads to the wondrous fruit, and the one who gains insight walks the path firmly. Verse 274. There is no other path than the Noble Eightfold Path that leads to wisdom, liberation, and purity. Follow this path with diligence, and all defilements and the armies of Mara will be defeated. Verse 275. When you follow the righteous path, suffering ends, all obstacles and afflictions are easily overcome. The Buddha has clearly shown the way. By walking it, wisdom grows and rebirth ceases. Verse 276. Practice diligently and without ceasing. The Buddha is the guide who shows the way. With meditation and focused effort, you will overcome the net of desire and the traps of Mara. Verse 277. With wisdom, observe the world carefully. All conditioned things are impermanent. By understanding this, you end suffering and walk freely along the path of joy and peace. Verse 278. With wisdom, observe the world carefully. All conditioned things bring suffering. By understanding this, sorrow and misfortune end, and the pure path of the Dhamma brings peace. Verse 279. With wisdom, observe everything. All conditioned things are without self. By understanding this, suffering dissolves, and the golden path of happiness is realized in this very moment. Verse 280. If you make no effort when it is needed, if you are lazy and careless in youth, desiring comfort and avoiding hardship, how will you ever find the path to wisdom? Verse 281. Guard your mind and avoid unwholesome deeds. Speak truthfully and live with integrity. Protect the three doors of action, body, speech, and mind, and you will follow the path taught by the noble ones. Verse 282. Meditation strengthens wisdom quickly, revealing the paths of birth and death. With diligence, work on yourself, sharpening your insight and reaching the highest goal. Verse 283. Desire is like a forest, thick and consuming. It fills the mind with fear and sorrow. Cut down the forest of craving entirely and walk the serene path of freedom. Verse 284. As long as one is entangled in the bonds of lust, it is difficult to master the mind. Like a calf tethered to its mother, the mind remains bound and cannot move freely. Verse 285. Break the bonds of attachment, just as one would break the stem of a lotus. Walk the tranquil path, advance in your practice, and slowly but surely attain the bliss of nirvana. Verse 286. This winter I'll stay here, and in summer too, in the rainy season I'll stay put. Such are the thoughts of the foolish, unaware of the looming danger of death. Verse 287. Clinging to possessions and attachments, thinking, this is my child, this is my wealth. They do not realize death is drawing near like a great flood sweeping away an entire village. Verse 288. When death arrives, no parent can save you, nor can your family or children protect you. Your own karma is all that follows you. No one can shield you from the consequences of your actions. Verse 289. When impermanence comes, no one can help. Recognizing this, purify your conduct and mind. Practice diligently and transform yourself. Attain nirvana and walk the golden path of truth. Mex wine. Miscellaneous verse 290. By abandoning small pleasures, one can attain greater happiness. The wise, indifferent to worldly desires, enjoy the peace and joy of nirvana. Verse 291. Those who bring suffering to others, yet wish for peace themselves, will find it impossible to escape the conflict that their hatred brings into their lives. Verse 292. When one neglects worthy actions and instead engages in unwholesome deeds, the foolish become arrogant and careless, increasing their suffering day by day. Verse 293. Contemplate the body as conditioned and impure. Diligently do what must be done. With mindfulness and a disciplined mind, all defilements and impurities will be eliminated. Verse 294. Kill the mother of attachment and the father of pride, and destroy the two kings of wrong views, eternalism and nihilism. Eradicate the 12 realms and desires, then the ascetic becomes truly free from sorrow. Verse 295. Kill the mother of attachment and the father of pride, and destroy the two kings of wrong views, eternalism and nihilism. Eliminate the false twin leaders of doubt, and the ascetic is free from all suffering. Verse 296. Buddha's disciples remain awake day and night, meditating on the Buddha's 10 virtues, mastering their body and mind with consistent mindfulness and effort. Verse 297. Buddha's disciples remain awake day and night, meditating on the Dhamma's 5 virtues, mastering their body and mind with consistent mindfulness and effort. Verse 298. Buddha's disciples remain awake day and night, meditating on the virtues of the Sangha, mastering their body and mind with consistent mindfulness and effort. Verse 299. Buddha's disciples remain awake day and night, contemplating the body's impurity and conditioned nature, mastering their body and mind with consistent mindfulness and effort. Verse 300. Buddha's disciples remain awake day and night, practicing compassion and non-harm to all beings, mastering their body and mind, delighting in non-violence with consistent mindfulness and effort. Verse 301. Buddha's disciples remain awake day and night, meditating to transform greed and anger, mastering their body and mind with consistent mindfulness and effort. Verse 302. How wonderful it is to live a true monastic life, free from the suffering of household life. Yet it is sad when friends do not understand, drowning in the endless cycle of sorrow and rebirth. Verse 303. Those with faith and perfect virtue increase their honor and spiritual wealth. Wherever they go, they are respected and honored by all, near and far. Verse 304. Even from a distance, the virtuous shine bright like a snow-capped mountain in the distance, but the wicked, even when close, are unseen, like arrows lost in the darkness of night. Verse 305. The solitary path, free from attachment, is not lonely nor filled with sorrow. Sitting, standing, walking, or lying down in silence, the deep forest is peaceful and the heart is at rest. 2. Hell. Verse 306. Those who lie and speak falsehoods, twisting the truth, deceiving others, denying their wrongs, and living immorally, will fall into the torment of hell after death. Verse 307. Those who wear the monk's robe as a disguise, living recklessly without upholding virtue, their evil actions will bear fruit, and after death they will descend into hell. Verse 308. It is better to swallow a burning iron ball than to live without virtue, feeding on offerings given in faith, unable to bear the karmic consequences of such actions. Verse 309. 4 misfortunes await the adulterer: restless sleep, bad luck, public shame, and eventually being led down the wrong path to fall into the suffering of hell. Verse 310. Those who are unfaithful are plagued by worry, living in constant anxiety with little joy. They risk falling under the weight of the law, while a faithful marriage brings blessings and honor. Verse 311. Holding a blade of grass improperly brings harm, just as living without virtue leads to misery. Monks who lack discipline and moral conduct will fall into the torment of hell, their fate uncertain. Verse 312. Those who live recklessly, without guarding the senses, whose virtue is corrupted and questionable, fail to follow the path of the noble ones, and are far from attaining the highest goal. Verse 313. What must be done should be done with firm resolve, with all of one's effort and dedication. A monk who strays and causes disharmony in the Sangha loses trust and casts confusion like a cloud of dust. Verse 314. One should avoid all evil and harmful deeds, for their consequences bring only pain and suffering. Instead, sow the seeds of goodness, and you will find peace, free from regret. Verse 315. Like a well-guarded fortress, protect your body and mind from recklessness. Without practicing the Dhamma, one is swept away by the tides of the world, falling into suffering. Verse 316. What is shameless brings guilt and remorse, while what is right seems burdensome. How can this be? Living with wrong views brings only suffering, leading to the depths of hell and endless torment. Verse 317. Fear arises where there should be none, and yet what is truly fearsome is ignored. How can this be? Living with wrong views brings only suffering, leading to the depths of hell and endless torment. Verse 318. Blaming others when there is no fault, and excusing oneself when guilty. How can this be? Living with wrong views brings only suffering, leading to the depths of hell and endless torment. Verse 319. When there is fault, acknowledge it as such, and where there is no fault, say so clearly. Living with right view brings peace and ease, and after death, one is reborn in the heavenly realms. The third. The elephant, verse 320. Like a battle elephant charging into the fray, enduring arrows and attacks without retreat, one who is practiced in mindfulness and self-control endures insults with calm, letting them go with ease. Verse 321. Elephants and noble horses are chosen by kings for royal processions and great assemblies. But among humans the wise stand out, patiently enduring the slander of wicked people. Verse 322. Like purebred horses and majestic elephants, or a great elephant with tusks of gleaming white, those who have mastered themselves, living in virtue, are the noblest of beings. Verse 323. It is not by riding fine horses or grand elephants that one attains nirvana. Only those who conquer themselves easily reach the ultimate goal of liberation. Verse 324. The elephant Taiho is fierce and difficult to tame, sweating and restless in the heat of desire. Kept in captivity, he neither eats nor drinks, longing for the freedom of the elephant forest. Verse 325. Those who are lazy, seeking only comfort, eating and sleeping excessively, are like fattened pigs, stuck in the endless cycle of birth and death. Verse 326. In the past my mind wandered without restraint, chasing after pleasures and desires, but now I have mastered my mind, like a skilled elephant trainer holding the reins. Verse 327. Rejoice in mindfulness, free from carelessness. Guard your mind and live in wakefulness. Break free from the chains of attachment, like an elephant freeing itself from the muddy swamp. Verse 328. When you find wise and virtuous companions, live and walk with them in joy and harmony. Together you can overcome all obstacles and live mindfully, finding peace and happiness. Verse 329. But if you cannot find a wise and virtuous friend, it is better to live alone, like a king who leaves behind a fallen kingdom, or an elephant roaming freely in the forest. Verse 330. It is better to live alone, content and peaceful, practicing virtue, than to be surrounded by fools. Live free from sorrow like an elephant in the deep woods. Verse 331. True happiness comes from having the right companions, but greater still is the happiness of being content with little. Blessed is the one who, at the end of life, dies with a heart full of virtue, leaving suffering behind, entering nirvana. Verse 332. True happiness is caring for one's parents, greater still is honoring monks and holy people. Blessed is reverence for the wise, and great is the joy of practicing mindfulness here and now. Verse 333. True happiness is growing old with virtue. Greater still is the happiness of profound wisdom. Blessed is the one who holds firm faith and deep understanding, and even greater is the happiness of abandoning evil and unwholesome ways. Intut 14, craving, verse 334. Those who live carelessly and indulge in desire allow their cravings to grow like creeping vines. From life to life, they jump from branch to branch, like a monkey seeking fruit in the forest. Verse 335. Those who live within the three realms, bound by craving and desire, find their suffering and unhappiness increasing, like rainwater causing weeds to overrun a field. Verse 336. But those who live within the three realms and have overcome the bonds of craving, their sorrow and suffering disappear, like water falling off a lotus leaf. Verse 337. Dear disciple, the Buddha teaches, uproot the roots of craving and attachment, crush the power of Mara, like a flood sweeping away reeds. Verse 338. Even when a tree is cut, if the root remains, it will sprout again, growing strong once more. So it is with latent craving, hard to let go, which continues to bring suffering, birth after birth. Verse 339. The 36 streams of craving flow, carrying people away into attachment and longing. These cravings, born of false views, drag beings into the endless cycle of suffering. Verse 340. Craving flows around everywhere, like a vine clinging to a tree, but with the sword of wisdom, cut it off. Sever the vine of craving here and now. Verse 341. Those who are obsessed with sensual pleasures cannot find peace or happiness. But those who abandon craving will end birth, old age, and all suffering. Verse 342. Those entangled in the pursuit of pleasure struggle and become trapped like a rabbit caught in a snare, suffering in the endless cycle of birth and death. Verse 343. Those bound by the desire for sensual pleasure flounder like a rabbit trapped in a net. But those who abandon sorrow and longing escape the path of birth and death. Verse 344. Leaving behind the jungle of desire, they fall into the jungle of craving. Those who escape one jungle and enter another are caught in sorrow, bound again by attachments. Verse 345. Iron chains, ropes, and vines can be broken, but the bonds of desire are much harder to cut. Tied to wealth, children, and spouse, they are held tight, unable to break free. Verse 346. Desire is a strong, unyielding bond, binding people to the suffering of existence. But the wise sever these ties, abandoning desire and living free. Verse 347. Those trapped in craving suffer greatly, like a spider caught in its own web. But the wise, having abandoned craving, live joyfully, free from the suffering of the world. Verse 348. Let go of the past, the future, and the present. With wisdom, live free and unburdened. Having crossed to the other shore, one lives beyond the cycle of birth and death. Verse 349. Those driven by wrong thoughts and filled with craving for pleasure bind themselves to the suffering of life, struggling to escape from the cycle of pain. Verse 350. Be mindful and contemplate the impurity of the body. Abandon wrong thoughts and calm the mind. Destroy the bonds of craving and live in peace, free and content. Verse 351. Once the final goal is reached, fear no more. Freed from craving, defilements, and delusion, the arrow of birth and death is removed. This is the last body, and suffering is no more. Verse 352. Freed from craving and attachment, this is the last body. One who speaks with wisdom and kindness, expounding the Dhamma clearly, is truly a wise person, deeply learned. Verse 353. I have mastered the path and understood all things. I am free from defilements, attachment, and craving. All impurities are gone. My insight is clear. I have realized the highest truth without a teacher. Verse 354. A gift of Dhamma surpasses all worldly gifts. The taste of the Dhamma is sweeter than any flavor. The joy of Dhamma is beyond all pleasures. Abandoning craving, one is freed from all suffering. Verse 355. Worldly possessions harm the foolish, who never seek the taste of nirvana. Blinded by attachment to wealth, they harm themselves and others, unable to escape suffering. Verse 356. Just as weeds destroy a well-tended garden, greed and attachment destroy the body. Offer gifts to those free from greed, and your good deeds will yield great merit. Verse 357. Just as weeds destroy a well-tended garden, hatred and anger destroy the body. Offer gifts to those free from hatred, and your good deeds will yield great merit. Verse 358. Just as weeds destroy a well-tended garden, delusion and ignorance destroy the body. Offer gifts to those enlightened with wisdom, and your good deeds will yield great merit. Verse 359. Just as weeds destroy a well-tended garden, desire and craving destroy the body. Offer gifts to those free from desire, and your good deeds will yield great merit. Esteem. The monk. Verse 360. Happy indeed is the one who guards their eyes. Happy indeed is the one who guards their ears, guarding the nose and tongue as well, living with restraint and finding peace within. Verse 361. Happy indeed is the one who guards their body. Happy indeed is the one who guards their speech. Happy is the one who guards their mind. The monk who practices restraint knows no more suffering. Verse 362. The monk who controls their hands, feet, and head, who controls their words and delights in meditation, lives alone, content and disciplined, and is truly worthy of the fruits of their practice. Verse 363. The monk who guards their mouth, who speaks with humility and teaches truth, explains the Dhamma with care and kindness, bringing peace and joy to others. Verse 364. A true practitioner loves the Dhamma, ponders deeply on the teachings they hear. Following the path of truth, they abandon delusion and find true happiness. Verse 365. One should not despise small gains, nor be envious of those who have more. A heart that lacks rejoicing in others' success will struggle to find peace in meditation. Verse 366. Even a small amount is not to be despised, for the diligent monk with strong virtue, maintaining their body and mind, is praised by the devas for their practice. Verse 367. A monk who lives without attachment, who is free from the delusion of self and mine, has let go of all possessiveness, and is worthy of being called a true monk. Verse 368. A monk who practices loving kindness and places faith in the profound Dhamma realizes peace and serenity, both inside and outside their practice. Verse 369. The wise monk bails the water from the boat, making it light and quick to sail. By eliminating ignorance, anger, and desire, they easily attain the peaceful nirvana. Verse 370. Cut off the 5 lower fetters, uproot the 5 higher bonds, abandon the 5 hindrances, and practice the 5 powers. Such a one is known as a great being, crossing the stream. Verse 371. A monk should meditate with mindfulness, and not be careless, attached to worldly pleasures. Carelessness is like a raging fire, consuming everything and bringing only suffering. Verse 372. Without wisdom, meditation is impossible, and without meditation, wisdom cannot arise. But for the one who has both deep wisdom and meditation, nirvana is clearly within reach. Verse 373. The monk who lives in solitude, keeping the mind calm and peaceful, observing the Dhamma and practicing meditation, enjoys the supreme happiness beyond worldly pleasures. Verse 374. The mindful one understands the arising and passing of all things, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. They experience the joy of peace, known to those who have transcended death. Verse 375. The wise live in contentment, guarding their senses and practicing the Dhamma. Diligent and virtuous, they associate with good friends free from suffering. Verse 376. When a monk conducts themselves with virtue, showing friendliness both inside and out, filled with joy and happiness, they put an end to suffering and attain nirvana. Verse 377. Just as a jasmine plant sheds its withered leaves and grows back green and vibrant, so too does a monk who practices diligently, overcoming desire and anger and flourishing in virtue. Verse 378. The peaceful monk focuses on their practice with a pure body and gentle speech. Diligent in meditation, they renounce worldly concerns and seek the bliss of nirvana. Verse 379. A monk must carefully examine themselves, assessing their conduct and motives. Mindful and diligent, they live in peace, free from sorrow. Verse 380. A monk should be self-reliant, seeking refuge within themselves. By mastering the mind, they walk the path like a trader guiding a well-trained horse. Verse 381. The monk rejoices in their practice, trusting in the taste of the Dhamma. Serene and peaceful, they attain complete joy, as all worldly attachments fade away. Verse 382. Though young in years, a monk who follows the path illuminates the world with their wisdom. Their understanding shines bright, like the moon freed from the clouds. 6.6. The Brahmin, verse 383. Be diligent, cut off the stream of craving, let go of the pleasures of the world. When all conditioned things are overcome, the Brahmin shines in the state of the unconditioned. Verse 384. Established in meditation and insight, the Brahmin reaches the far shore of peace. With wisdom shining bright, they destroy all fetters and live the golden path. Verse 385. The Brahmin clings to neither this shore nor the other, their mind free from all attachments. With suffering ended, bonds broken, the one who trains thus is a true Brahmin. Verse 386. Meditating, living in seclusion, with defilements uprooted and duties fulfilled, having reached the highest goal, such a one is a shining Brahmin. Verse 387. The sun and moon shine by day and night, and kings shine brightly in their armor. But the one who meditates and shines with wisdom illuminates both heaven and earth. Verse 388. Those who have abandoned evil are true ascetics, the ones who live with pure conduct. Monks who are free from defilements are truly noble, beyond worldly distinctions. Verse 389. Harm not the ascetics or the wise. Even when faced with adversity, do not retaliate. It brings sorrow to harm those on the path. Do not seek revenge or harbor enmity. Verse 390. A true Brahmin harms no one, free from revenge, anger, and hatred, both inwardly and outwardly peaceful. They live with great joy, free from all distress. Verse 391. The one who creates no evil in body, speech, or mind, living with pure conduct and action, is truly a wise Brahmin, full of virtue. Verse 392. Grateful are those who recognize their teacher's gift, the guidance to understanding Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. With sincere devotion and respect, a Brahmin honors the wise as one would honor sacred fire. Verse 393. One is not a Brahmin by birth or lineage, but by living in truth, mindfulness, and peace. A Brahmin is recognized by their virtue, shining with the light of practice. Verse 394. A so-called Brahmin, busy with external appearances, wears tangled hair or a robe of animal skins. If their mind is still defiled and darkened, they are far from the true path of liberation. Verse 395. Even if thin and gaunt, wearing a patchwork robe, if one practices meditation day and night, they are truly a Brahmin, standing tall like a mountain of virtue. Verse 396. Not by birth is one a true Brahmin, but by being free from defilements. The one whose mind is pure and undefiled, who lives in peace, is a true Brahmin. Verse 397. The Brahmin who has cut all bonds, who is not distressed by gain or loss, who has let go of all attachments, is truly wonderful and wise. Verse 398. The Brahmin who has renounced anger and tamed greed, wrong views and ignorance, has overcome the darkness of delusion and walks the path to enlightenment, free from rebirth. Verse 399. Using patience as their weapon, the Brahmin fights with no ill will, harboring no hatred but with compassion, they conquer anger and live in peace. Verse 400. Free from anger, dutiful, virtuous, their senses fully mastered, always mindful. This is their final body, and such a Brahmin shines with the light of purity. Verse 401. The Brahmin who has let go of all impurities, like water off a lotus leaf or mustard seed on the tip of a needle, is truly worthy and pure. Verse 402. The Brahmin who has realized the Four Noble Truths knows the end of suffering and the path to nirvana. Living by the Dhamma, they are free from all craving and attachment. Verse 403. The Brahmin who understands both good and evil and sees the true origin of all things, who has attained deep liberation, is truly wise and deserving of honor. Verse 404. The Brahmin who lives in solitude, free from desires, content and peaceful, like a cloud floating across the sky, enjoys true happiness and freedom from sorrow. Verse 405. The Brahmin who abstains from harming others, whether weak or strong, who neither commands nor coerces, is a true monk, peaceful and wise. Verse 406. The Brahmin who remains friendly amidst hostility, who is gentle even when others are harsh, who stays pure amidst worldly impurities, is truly noble and enlightened. Verse 407. The Brahmin who has conquered all attachment, letting go of hatred, desire and pride, with a mind as pure as a needle's tip, is free and unbound, walking the path of wisdom. Verse 408. The Brahmin who speaks words of kindness, always truthful and beneficial, speaking with compassion and love, is truly a bright example for others. Verse 409. The Brahmin who refrains from stealing, taking only what is given, whether large or small, valuable or not, is truly an example of virtue and wisdom. Verse 410. The Brahmin who has no desire for this life or the next, free from the bonds of worldly existence, is truly liberated and shines with wisdom. Verse 411. The Brahmin who is free from desire, who has great wisdom and no doubt, having attained nirvana, is a true example of liberation. Verse 412. The Brahmin who does not cling to good or evil, living with detachment, free from all bonds, peaceful, free from sorrow, is a true example of a liberated being. Verse 413. Like the moon shining clear, free from clouds, radiant and bright, the Brahmin whose mind is pure and free from defilement has entered the stream of the noble path. Verse 414. Free from craving, clinging and rebirth, having crossed the ocean of suffering, the Brahmin, serene and enlightened, has truly transcended the cycle of birth and death. Verse 415. For the sake of the higher path, leaving home and worldly pleasures, the Brahmin who has renounced all attachment is truly a seeker of liberation. Verse 416. For the sake of the higher path, leaving behind worldly desires, the Brahmin who has abandoned craving is a true seeker of freedom and truth. Verse 417. The Brahmin who is free from all bonds, beyond the realms of humans and gods, unattached, liberated, has entered the stream of the noble path. Verse 418. The Brahmin who has transcended both likes and dislikes, who has overcome the clinging to the five aggregates, is a hero, victorious over defilements and truly worthy of the highest honor. Verse 419. The Brahmin who understands the path of life and death, free from delusion, shining with clarity, having realized the Four Noble Truths, is a true example of one who has attained liberation. Verse 420. The Brahmin who has transcended all existence, unseen by the gods, spirits, or mortals, having destroyed all defilements, is truly worthy of the title of a noble one. Verse 421. The Brahmin who clings to nothing, not to the past, future, or present, free from all attachments, shines like the moon among the stars. Verse 422. Like a mighty bull leading the herd, The Brahmin is strong, a true conqueror of defilements. With wisdom, purity, and enlightenment, they are truly worthy of respect. Verse 423, the Brahmin who knows the past and future, who understands the cycles of rebirth with perfect wisdom and liberation, has ended the cycle of birth and death, shining in the world.